The NBA 2026 offseason has been one for the books. Let me tell you, man. It's been crazy. We've had some blockbuster trades go down. We've had some key guys going to different places. So we'll talk about all that today. Kind of dive into how free agency has gone over the last 2 days. Really, just balling out. Sean and Nate with you guys today, holding it down for Grant. But yeah, man. Like I said, it's been a lot that's happened over the last couple of days. Free agency did officially open on the 30th and at 6 p.m. and it was a quiet 6 p.m. And then, yeah, all of a sudden, a whole bunch of stuff happened, especially yesterday. Oh, some trades. So let's talk about these trades first before we get into like the signings and stuff. So, first one, you gotta obviously we'll talk about it. Kawhi Leonard goes back to Toronto after not wanting to be there, right? When he won the championship, goes back to Toronto. Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, and some picks go back to the Clippers. I mean, just like on paper, this Raptors team, they're looking pretty nice. Very defensively, right? You got Kawhi, you got Scotty Barnes, still RJ Barrett, quickly, CMB, Colin Murray's Boyle. So, I mean, this team, like on paper, it looks nice, to make another playoff push. And, this past postseason, they took Cleveland to 7 games. They almost beat them. Right. So, you basically, upgraded Brandon Ingram for Kawhi Leonard, which, is a A+ upgrade right there. But what's your thoughts on, that trade?
I know we talked about it last time, and we were both kind of like, we would like to see Kawhi potentially go back to Toronto. It was kind of a, obviously stronger rumor as time kept going on, but I think in terms of what the Clippers were able to get back in the trade, it was probably a little bit like more than I thought in terms of the draft picks. But I mean, I like it for both sides, honestly. I think looking into it more, like Kawhi, this is his last year on his contract. So it's really not a huge, risk, I feel like, for Toronto in terms of that. Like, you bring back a guy who obviously won you a championship back in 2019, and then, you get rid of a guy and Ingram who obviously didn't have like the playoff series that he wanted, or I think Toronto fans wanted from him. And you kind of just get off of that. And then Grady Dick, he had been good in his first like year, but this last year he didn't live up to I think as much as he wanted to. So I mean, for both sides, I think for the Clippers, it obviously gets them off of that Kawhi Leonard, era where unfortunately for you, like they didn't live up to I think all the hype and expectations that they wanted to, but they still, I mean, had some pretty decent runs. I know they went to the conference finals once, and now with Keaton Wagler being looking like their future point guard, and they can kind of just get a little bit younger and move on from there. And I mean, Steve Ballmer, he's always looking to make some moves. So I'm not convinced that this is going to be the last thing that they do this offseason. I think that they probably try to pick up another couple guys. I know, I think in terms of contract wise, they might be a little tight, but I still think in terms of if they want to try to stay relatively competitive for the West this season, obviously they're going to have to develop some of their younger players, but I think that this is a good step forward for their franchise. And for Toronto, yeah, on paper, it definitely looks like they're going to have a nice little starting five, maybe 6, 7 man too. So I'm excited to see how him and Sky Barnes play together. And I think too, with Kawhi just being a little bit more of like a quieter player, obviously. Hopefully he can kind of get a little bit, more like his joy, I guess, of like playing back maybe in a city that brought him some success and get away from some of the LA lights and all that. So, but what do you think in terms of the Clippers, what they got back? I know maybe it wasn't the package that people expected, but I still think Ingram's got a lot to prove. I mean, I always really liked his game back in New Orleans too. So, I want to see him play next to Garland too. I think they could be a nice little duo, and I still think he could still have a good little stint in LA.
Yeah, I think I'm interested to see just like because he's dealt with injuries, right? His last couple of years, like last year in Toronto, dealt with injuries. His last year in New Orleans, didn't really play much. So like, I am interested to see like how much he can stay on the floor, right, and play with Darius Garland, with Keaton Wagler. I do think like it's exciting, to go from what we have been the last couple of years of like aging all stars and veteran players to now just like a younger core we got going on here. I do like it, and I think you touched on this last pod, but like Yeah, Kawhi's value is at its highest right now, right? And so it was time. Like, yeah, I was a little bit sad about it, just because like I like Kawhi. I'm still gonna root for him in Toronto, but just like it was like I guess a shock to see like the package that they did get, especially like those picks. Those picks, Clippers now have 9 first round picks, so I don't expect them to keep those though. Maybe through the trade deadline, but like I do see some of those picks going away to get maybe an all-star player, a star player to kind of pair with, with whether it be Wagler and Garland or, kind of piece them with all three they got going on there. So I do like the package. I do like the return. And hopefully, Kawhi going back to the six, hopefully I'm sure Toronto fans are hoping for another championship run. So that'll be interesting to see. I think the main thing for the Raptors is it was a big risk, right? Kawhi is coming off his healthiest season this past year, really since that run where he made in 2019 with Toronto, and so now it's just kind of like making sure he can stay healthy to help the Raptors, compete for a title. Because like you said, on paper right now, this team is looking solid. So obviously, you just got to wait to see how it looks on the court. So but yeah, overall for both teams, I think it was a good package. Clippers moving on from this era, getting younger, and then for the Raptors, kind of just retooling a couple of things, to get better, have a better, postseason push. So yeah, that's that trade. Then we got probably the biggest trade, that honestly I think this trade was more shocking than the Luca trade. I want to get your thoughts on it, but Jaylen Brown goes to the Philadelphia 76ers for Paul George and a handful of picks. With some first rounders in there, swaps, second rounders. I just think like it's so crazy that like these two teams, they're fierce rivals, right? Just went 7 games. Celtics just blew a 3-1 lead against the Sixers into this postseason. Philly won, right? Beat the Celtics for the first time in years in the postseason. And now, you flopped, basically your wing guys. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter that said like the Celtics really didn't get worse. And I think they didn't really get worse, but at the same time, I don't think they got really better because like when I see it, I see Paul George and Jaylen Brown as like the same type of player, right? High volume shooters, turnovers are a question, right? Can they lead the team? Yes, at times, but it is, kind of questionable at times. Uh, but I mean, for the Sixers, they're my favorites to win the East right now. I mean, just on paper. And Embiid, I know is a question, but you don't even need to play him. If Embiid plays 40 games, 40, 50 games during the regular season, that's the max I'm putting him at, right? And I'm like, bro, just put him right to the postseason because Jaylen Brown, Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe can hold it down for the regular season, get you anywhere from like the 3 to the 6 seed, and you're solid. So that's my thoughts on it. What's yours?
Yeah, I mean, this when I saw it happen last night, I literally had to just like sit down for a minute because I was like, bro, like out of all the teams that potentially could have gotten Jaylen Brown, like, I mean, the beginning of the summer, we were thinking, well, he's going to Milwaukee and Giannis is going to be in Boston, and for it to end up to being Paul George and 2 first round picks and 2 seconds or whatever what it ended up being, it's just kind of like I think that's kind of what is making a lot of people feel like this trade is just a little more underwhelming for Boston, at least because you had just such high hopes of what you could have potentially gotten for him. And to feel like you settled for obviously like an older Paul George who, he had some issues last year, he's suspended, he's kind of had some injury issues in the past couple years. And, I think for Boston's side of it, like from what I've seen, yeah, like Brad Stevens and him like they weren't really getting along, or at least they weren't talking much. And I think when you're shopping a guy like Jaylen Brown for however many months they were, it obviously, yeah, we had said like is probably his time. But I think, like you said, for them to send him to the Sixers, who they just were in the playoff series against, obviously they've been, a rival for a long time. It's just, a little bit more of a shock, I think, for the fan base because you're going to have to see him just so much more every single year
Yeah.
and be like, we traded him. He was our finals MVP and now he's playing essentially for our rival. But yeah, I like too for Philly. I think they really came out of nowhere. I mean, I did see things of like maybe they potentially could have offered BJ, but as time went on, like his value just kind of got lower and lower, and maybe there was just less teams out there that were willing to give up anything else. So, with Paul George, his money matches, more similarly than maybe other teams could probably offer.
Yeah.
But I think it just makes Philly, yeah, like that much more a problem in the East. Obviously, there's the question about Embiid, how is he going to look throughout the season? But I think this is more of a benefit towards Embiid because now you could probably say, all right, it's okay if you only play, the 65 games or less. And we're going to have BJ and Maxi and Brown kind of hold it down during most of the regular season for us until we get to a point later in the season where we want to try to start, making that playoff run. But I mean, I know like Philly, they lost Oubre, they've lost a couple other guys, so they're still gonna have to round out the bench. I still think like now thinking about it, like should they have, in hindsight, obviously Daryl Morey's not there, but like, would a guy like Jared McCain, could he have been in a trade like this? Or if he stayed, like how much more could he have even helped the team? But I know they just signed Anthony Simons too, so he's gonna be a little bit of a off the bench punch for him, which I like. But yeah, I think in the grand scheme of like looking at this, it's just kind of like when two rival teams are trading like this for essentially superstar players. I'm not going to disrespect PG like that. He's still that guy. And I think PG even had a pretty good season last year when he was playing. So I think it's just going to come down to like, how is Tatum really going to respond from this? Is he going to show that he can be a guy that now averages 30 and leads their team to his, close to 61 season like Brown did last year? And is Brown going to have to kind of get in where he fits in Philly, or is he going to try to, say this is going to be my offense now? But I do like the move. Maybe, Boston, it was probably just kind of a desperation thing for them. I do hate that, like, obviously a lot of the fans are not happy, but I think when it comes down to a disgruntled player and when your owner or your GM, like Brad Stevens is not, messing with that, then you just kind of have to make whatever is available. So, it is gonna be fun to see though. I can't wait for that first matchup. I think I saw a meme where it was like, when Russ and Katie first played against each other, and it was like when Tatum and Brown are first gonna play against each other. So
Yeah.
that's gonna be fun to see.
Yeah, that I honestly, I think it could be a game one, matchup right there. You've seen it before, and like you said, two rivals. I think to me, it was just two. You mentioned like the Celtics were just. It looks like they're desperate because a lot of like analysts said this too. Like, if that was the best package, then like why didn't you like wait, for something else? Maybe, a better player or like more draft capital. So I was kind of upset, from like Pistons standpoint because it was like, dang, like that's all it took. Man, you could have gave him Jalen Duran, yeah. And picks for Jaylen Brown. That would have been, solid. But they did just sign Mitchell Robinson too, which I guess, the from the Celtics standpoint, yes, they do get improve a little bit better around the margins. But I do think like Philly overall, they kind of won this trade just because like I just think they're a better all around team. And like you said, they got to fill out the bench a little bit. Getting Simons is great. I think at that team and the role, he could be like a six-man candidate, a six-man of the year candidate right there. But yeah, I just think, we're still early in the offseason, right? So, there's much more to happen, in the next coming days and weeks and things of that matter. So yeah,
Yeah.
two teams that obviously we got to keep an eye on going into the season.
Well,
So
and honestly, one thing that kind of like I was wondering about is like throughout this whole Brown situation, let me know what you think too. But like, I never really heard anything from Tatum, like his co-star duo, like saying, "Hey, I want to play with this guy," or like, I want him to stay. He's just been kind of silent about this all. I feel like in times past, like maybe not similarly, but like these guys, they won a title together, and maybe they didn't have the closest relationship, and maybe Tatum did kind of want like to have that spotlight. But I would just feel like if you really felt like he was your best option to run it back, then try to speak up. If anything, like Tatum was going to be the guy who to maybe try to keep him, like if they said that he wanted to stay. But I think it was more of like Brad Stevens' decision too of like, this guy's, you know, just not fitting anymore into what we want to go forward. So we'll see in terms of how I think PG will fit in just as well. But even if Paul George averages like 19, 18 points, I still think they could be solid. It's just a matter of how are they gonna like recover, I think more like mentally and in the locker room from, getting rid of a guy, because I can't imagine that first home game when, they're playing and like their former, finals MVP isn't there, and like, how are the fans going to really respond? It doesn't seem like many people like it. So that's going to be one thing I think that the team is going to have to try to like fight throughout the whole season.
Yeah, and on top of that, I'd like to hear what like did Joe Mazzulla have like any say or decisions in this? Because I mean, like you said, like last year, like he depended on Jaylen Brown, right, to be the guy. And so now, it flips back, to Tatum instead of, them both. I read a couple things that said, they felt that it was Derek White that had the better season than Jaylen Brown last year, which statistically and analytically no, but I mean, maybe, deeper in that, but beyond the X's and O's, maybe Derek White was a little bit better from like a leadership standpoint or something like that. But yeah, I mean, just overall, I think it was just a crazy trade. Yeah, I think Sixers fans are glad to get off that Paul George contract. And then yeah, like you said, for Celtics fans, that game one, I think you look up at that banner and you're gonna think about Jaylen Brown, and he's not gonna be on the court, and I think it's gonna be a little weird. So I think overall, just what the Celtics have done the last two past off seasons, you look at that 2024 team when they won the championship, and we were like, man, like this team, obviously the second apron and things like that, but that team was just one of the best teams, right? And then now to look at where they are, fast forward into July 2nd, 2026, completely different. So I am interested to see, how they kind of go forward and, just fill out the rest of the roster and how they compete, after, coming off of 2 years removed off a championship. So, yeah. And then another big trade, Walker Kessler from the Jazz. He was a restricted free agent. He goes to the Lakers for basically a whole bunch of picks. It was another classic Danny Ainge fleece, basically. And so the Luca gets his big. It's said that Luca has been one of the big, and we've seen it with the Mavericks. Right, he needed a competent big, better than DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes, right, to kind of put him in the best position. What's your thoughts on this? I know you're not a Lakers fan anymore because Brown isn't there anymore, but what's your thoughts on just this move for the Lakers?
Yeah, I mean, to touch on the Braun thing, like the news broke, he's not going to be coming back to LA, which I think Grant and I were thinking that. You were thinking maybe he's going to stay in LA, but unfortunately, he's not anymore. It's looking like he's either going back home to Cleveland or to Golden State. But for the Lakers, I mean, I feel like this is probably another like I don't even know if it's like panic job, but after that kind of bombshell news that Braun's not coming back, like the team needed to do something. Poinka needed to do something quick to try to, get a little bit of momentum back on their side, I feel like. And, I liked Walker Kessler when he was playing. I know he only played like 5 games last year, and people were saying, like, well, how are you gonna pay him all this money all of a sudden? But like he's a baller. I don't think he's really gonna have any issues coming back. Like if it turns out that yes, he does struggle with injury, that's going to be kind of hard for Lakers fans. But in terms of like on paper, looking at it, like I like the signing. I think in terms of the picks they gave up, if they're thinking that they're going to be decent anyway, then like maybe they don't even really matter. And I think with this new lottery, a lot of these teams like are devaluing some of these first round picks a little bit more. And they're just kind of seeing like, okay, what can we get for these picks later on in 2030 plus that we don't even really know where they're going to end up and actually get some value back right now for what we can do currently. So I think he's going to be nice alongside Luca and AR, but I mean, I know they signed Mamu and Quentin Grimes and Colin Sexton as well. And I think, that's kind of most of their cap right now. I think it's going to be, it doesn't move me a ton really. Like it does definitely seems like they kind of were just grabbing at maybe some of the best available guys left in those roles, or at least that were playing on their team at the time. Because I like Colin Sexton, I like Grimes, and I think they are both going to play significant roles for the team. But it's like, I don't think they're going to be a 55, 50 win team. Like, if anything, like 40, 42 maybe wins. And that's if I think those three guys, Luca, AR, and Kessler, stay healthy. But for the Jazz, like, it definitely seems like Danny Ainge is, you know, along with being able to get younger and have a pretty nice core now, like, he's also looking into the future of like, okay, if these guys don't work out, hopefully we can strike gold with one of these picks again and get another top five pick. So I think for the Jazz, it didn't even seem like they wanted to keep Kessler. Maybe they were a little more concerned with the injury stuff. And, I know they re-signed Nurkic too. So they already have a big, he was playing pretty well for him last year. So maybe that's kind of less of a concern. Kessler, I think he's probably going to take away some touches and everything else from, Peterson and some of their other young guys. So does it suck to lose a young player like that? Yes, but I think they're still going to be fine in the long run.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if this was like that's why the Jaren Jackson move trade at the deadline kind of set up for this because it was all these rumors and stuff that Walker Kessler wanted this big chunk of money, but like you said, like he hadn't really proved it yet. Last year, playing 5 games and then being out for the season, and just being inconsistent a couple times. But I mean, he's a stretch big, right? So I think he will fit well with the Lakers. But yeah, I agree. I don't think really any of the moves, Kessler, Mamu, Grimes, Sexton, I don't really see this moving the Lakers, better than what they were this past year. So yeah, just the West. I mean, really the East too is going to be very competitive this year, and we're already, like I said, a couple days into free agency. So
Right. Well, and honestly, it's going to be like not not identical to the Brown thing, but like LeBron's not coming back, and your fan base is essentially gonna like hate you for it. So, what can you try to do to like at least keep some of the momentum or like positives on your side? And I think getting guys who have decent potential, like the guys they signed, is a good step. It's just like from a casual, fan perspective, it's like, I don't know how well Mamu played or Grimes or any of these guys. So especially in LA, it's gonna be, we need a star. And if we don't get it, then we don't really care who else is on the team. So I do hope that Luca stays healthy throughout the whole year next year. I think that will kind of give him a little bit more of a boost in terms of this team's like fan base, but also like just himself. Cause I think last year was probably pretty hard for him. I know he went through a couple different personal things, but he's still in his prime, and I think we'll have a pretty good season next year, regardless if LeBron is there or not.
right. Yeah. I think, he's going to really have to backpack this team, him and AR. I think it's possible, for them to do it. But like you said, the health issue is a big thing, for all teams. But I think specifically for this Lakers team, especially with, your best two players last postseason, right? Barely even played. I mean, what Reeves played 2 games in the OKC series. Luca didn't play at all. So yeah, it'll be tough, but we'll see what the Lakers end up doing. Do want to note though that they have I saw there was no tradable first round picks for the next 7 seasons. So basically, if Luca walks away or if Luca's out for the season, then the Lakers are cooked. So I guess it was a good thing that you denounced your Lakers fan and got out of there when you could, because right now it's looking all right, but the future and it's looking a little grim. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But yeah, I mean, and then there was some I wouldn't say, bigger, but notable free agent signings. Tobias Harris, Unk, leaves the Pistons, goes to the Spurs, 2 years, $31 million. I think it's a good move for the Spurs. I want to get your take on this. I think it's a good move. But at the same time, I mean, they just re signed Julian Champagnie. So I'm kind of curious to see, like, are they moving one of them to the bench? Are they doing something with Vassell? Like, is Vassell going to be gone? Right? You put Toby or Champagnie at the 3. Yeah, so I'm curious to see what they kind of end up doing there. But what's your thoughts on that signing?
It was sad to see, him go. I liked him on Detroit. He was a guy who obviously he played for us earlier, and then came back when we were terrible. So, props to him for kind of believing in the core, the younger core that we had, and then actually accomplishing, making it to the length that we did in the playoffs. But it is interesting because they did re-sign like Harrison Barnes as well. So it's not like they have like too many like fours like wings, but maybe the Spurs are just kind of looking at him as another guy that can provide like a not championship mentality, but like just a little bit more of a veteran presence for some of these younger guys. I think he's obviously going to help them in terms of like the 3-and-D stretchability that they have, and alongside Wemby, he's not going to have to worry about being that second option, like kind of like he was in Detroit. So maybe he can kind of just relax a little bit more on that side of things. But you know, he's 34 now. I don't really know how much longer he's going to be playing. I know he has, he signed for 2 years, but let's say he plays there 3 years, and then I don't know if really any other team outside of that. This might be kind of his last chance to make something out of his career as well. But, I wish him the best. I think he provided a lot of spark for the younger guys in Detroit. And so I think he'll be able to do that in San Antonio as well.
Yeah, I got nothing but respect for Unc, man. Game 7 Orlando will go down in the history books. I will always remember him for that 30-piece masterclass. I mean, could not miss. It's just, oh man. But yeah, I mean, like you said, for a guy from we were the worst team in the league to come in, right, and provide that leadership, provide that help, that mentality that we needed, I got nothing for respect for Tobias Harris. Wish him the best. And hey, I mean, he puts himself in a position again to win a championship. The Spurs just coming off a finals appearance. They're a very young team. He's one of the older guys, like him and Harrison Barnes. I think are like the two oldest guys on the team, right? So, you bring that back and everyone else, and it's looking pretty solid. So, yeah, I think Spurs, definitely did something there. Then, speaking of the Pistons, John Collins to the Pistons, 3-year, $51 million deal. What's your thoughts on, the lob threats to Detroit?
Don't hate it. I think, you know, for his contract, it's pretty fair. He didn't obviously get to play a ton in LA, and I don't think he really was like set up in LA for a way to him to succeed very much. Obviously, the focus was still more on Kawhi, and with them trading Harden and getting Garland midseason, I think it just kind of threw his role a little bit more unknown. So for Detroit, his role is obviously going to be, be that rim threat on offense, but also provide some of that defense that we lost from Stewart leaving now. He's still decently young. I think he's like 28 or 29. So I don't think it's a terrible signing. It's just going to be like, what is his game outside of the paint going to be like? I know he can stretch the floor a little bit, but I think that's kind of why we also re-signed guys like Herter and get Isaiah Joe and some of these other guys to, make up for his lack of, I guess, outside shooting. But I don't hate it. I think he is going to be nice with Cade. It's going to be kind of fun to see. I think he'll look decent in a Detroit jersey, but it's just going to, yeah, like, how is he mentally going to kind of be on this team coming from a place where he didn't really know his role as much, and can JB and the guys around him kind of let him know like this is where you need to be, and we're going to make sure that you succeed in this role. But I don't hate it. What do you think?
My only question would just be like the defense, right? His defense is a little bit questionable at times. But like on offense, like he's a good 3-point shooter. He's not the best like shot creator that, everyone was saying, we're looking for, right? But I mean, he can still, go get a bucket. He can finish live. He's versatile. I think mainly, and this is still up in the air, but depending on, what ends up happening with Duran, how will those two, coexist, right? Two lob threats, same thing. I mean, we've seen it before, right? The perfect example, LAC, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, something like that. So, maybe we could try to, get into that book a little bit more. But I do like the signing. I do think that, some people are saying like this was worse than Tobias. I wouldn't necessarily say worse, and I can't necessarily say it was like a mile better, like so much better than Tobias Harris. But I am curious to see, like you said, because he's been on good teams before, right? When he was with the Jazz, he was solid. When he was with the Hawks, they made that Eastern Conference Finals run. He was solid. He was decent. So he's improved his game year after year. So I'm excited to see, what he kind of can bring to JB's team, and see how this kind of goes. So we'll end up seeing there. And then Norman Powell. So that was another name that was linked to the Pistons for a while. Former Miami Heat player. He's going to the Chicago Bulls for 2 years, $45 million. He wanted a bag. So I get it. Why the Bulls went after another guard, don't understand, but it's the Bulls. Honestly, I mean, I think it's solid. They needed a shooter. They needed somebody that can go get their shot, right? You have Caleb Wilson, who's probably going to be the focal point, right? You have Josh Giddey. You have Matas. So it'll be interesting to see, how he kind of fits in with this team. But what's your thoughts on?
Yeah, from kind of what I was seeing too, it definitely seemed like Miami was not gonna keep him. Originally once they got Giannis, they were throwing like the mock of him in the lineup, but for what he will provide for the Bulls, I think yeah, like you said, he'll provide that shooting. He's definitely going to be. I mean, do you think he'll be like a starter on this team? Like for what he's getting paid, that's starter money. But
Yeah.
if it's gonna be Giddy, him, Matas, or like I feel like Wilson, you want to put in that starting lineup.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know they re-signed Zach Collins, but they don't really have like a center right now, I guess. Or they got Claxton. So
Class.
they'll have
Yeah.
Claxton at the five. I mean, he could be a pretty solid six man unless they want to throw one of the other guards in this in on the bench. But you know, this is another very young team that I think needs a guy like Powell who's been on multiple different rosters and he's been around the league and he kind of knows how to play a role. So maybe that's just one thing that he'll be able to provide for them is to show some of these younger guys like you don't have to necessarily be that guy right away and it takes a little bit of time. I'm thinking I guess more for Caleb Wilson like he's going to be the guy but you don't have to have everything all together in the first season that you play. It's going to take a couple years to develop. So I like the move. Chicago, I don't really expect them, I guess, to do a whole lot, but I just hope that yeah, Wilson has a good year for them and that they can kind of just develop him properly and some of the other younger guys around him. It does make me more confident. I don't think they'll get rid of Giddy now though at this point, just because I think they'll need a ball handler. And I honestly think Giddy played pretty well for him last year. So
Yeah, the last 2 seasons, he's been pretty good. I mean, I think yeah, the starting or the bench role, like, he's kinda played both, right? And LAC and Miami and Toronto, he's kinda, like, filled all the roles before. So, I'm curious to see, like, where he kinda fits in, but I do agree with you that, like, just the veteran presence, right, with this young team trying to figure things out, right? And what they've been for over the last couple of years, kind of bottom of the conference, right? Starting what 5-0 last season, and then basically falling off the cliff. So yeah, I think it's good for them to kind of get somebody with that mentality and leadership to kind of help get these guys in check, right? And try to put Chicago in the best position possible. Like you said too, like I don't expect them to make a playoff push, maybe a play-in push. But with the way the East is right now, I think they're still bottom the East and have some more steps to go. So we'll see
right.
about that. And last one I had, last big one, Marcus Smart, going to team back up with Ime, 2-year, $13 million deal with the Rockets. Player option on that second year. Former defensive player goes to Houston and more so another ball handler because it was many times last year. Obviously, Fred VanVleet will be back this season, but it was multiple times last year where you could tell the Houston Rockets needed a ball handler, right? Needed somebody that would just go out there and distribute or, kind of, look for their own shot. Marcus Smart does that. He's not the best shooter. He's not, Stephen Curry or a lights out shooter, but I mean, he can, hunt his own shot and, he's a good veteran leader. Uh, I'm interested to see him and Kevin Durant, kind of play with each other. I feel like there's just going to be one time where they're clashing heads and that's going to be great. A great little video to see on Twitter one night, them going at it at the bench. But what's your thoughts on that move?
Yeah, I mean, it's another guy that Katie can call trash and in group chats. So I mean, honestly, I felt like the Lakers probably could have re-signed him, like he $12 million deal for 2 years. Like that's not really a ton for. Obviously, he's older, but it makes me think about how this roster is actually going to work because last year, yeah, you didn't have Van Vliet, and you really had to rely a lot on Reed Shepard and Amen to be the ball handlers. So, is Reed Shepard gonna have to take a step back a little bit, or is Amen gonna try to play more of an off ball role? You know, but this Rockets team, I really thought they would do more in the trade market. They've had talks about Jabari Smith and some of these other guys on their team, Shengun, in the postseason, stuff like this. So I really thought that this was going to be a team that made a little bit more trade noise, but if they want to try to run it back with what they had and add, they had Bogdanovich as well, another shooter. But at the same time, I just feel like it's from, there's some aspects where they have some young players, but like it is kind of an older team now that I look at it, like with KD, Fred Van Vliet, Dorian Finney Smith, Steven Adams, Clint Capella. Like they got some older guys along with, yeah, Marcus Smart and Bogdanovich now. So I don't really know in terms of let me see in terms of like what kind of draft picks they have too, because if they're not really sitting on a ton, then I don't really know in terms of the next couple years what's gonna look like that. Because do you think Katie like retires on the Rockets? And that just kind of feels weird.
Nah, I think he's got one more trade request in him.
Yeah, he got one more. Yeah, it's probably gonna happen this year.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's got one more trade request in him. Where it is too, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like you said, like this team does look just a little bit older, right? Like, yeah, they have the younger pieces in Sengun and Jabari Smith and Aman, but like, yeah, this team, I feel like from what they were last year, right, being upset in the playoffs against the Lakers. The year before, they had that great run, right? And just lost to a better Golden State team. Then you come back, you get Kevin Durant. I think they do like I am kind of surprised that they haven't kind of made more moves on the trade market side. I think, Terry Eason, he's still, a free agent. Maybe they're trying to bring him back. Maybe they're, letting him go. But yeah, I think I kind of want to say, and honestly, after Brown and Luca and all these random trades, LaMelo, like it's up in the air, right? I think, some of these teams are kind of just waiting, I think, until kind of these first few days kind of pass by. Maybe, let the holiday weekend pass by and maybe then you get down to business a little bit more. Kind of see like where you're at. But like, yeah, like you said, like I am curious to see just like future wise, especially like this year. If they don't do good this year, then like their future, if they don't have a bunch of picks, then they're kind of like in limbo right there, right? It's like, okay, either like you push forward with this, regime maybe one more year, or you kind of be like just say, hey, we're dumping everybody. I did see, like, I think it was end of the season, basically, once they were out, that Amen was like the only untouchable player on the roster. So, yeah, I am curious to see, what could they kind of end up doing. I wouldn't be surprised if they do end up running it back and like, hey, we bring back Fred, we add Marcus Smart, and Bogey. So maybe, we can be a little bit better, but I don't know. I'm not really moved by Houston. I wasn't last year really high on them coming into this offseason. I don't think I still am. And like I said, we'll see once we get close to the season. But yeah, they're kind of like in limbo right now, right? Especially I think Emo is on the hot seat as well too. So
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, like Shengun and Shepard, like I feel like I heard their name in trade talks a ton
yeah,
last year, even though people were like, oh, that's going to be like a young core that they want to keep. But, I just feel like every team KD plays for, this kind of happens where it's like, whether it's Phoenix or Brooklyn or, I mean, even Golden State a little bit, like towards the end of the season, if they don't win at all or they aren't in a position in the playoffs that they want to be, it's kind of like, well, what do we do with some of the younger players? Do it to like try to make Katie more happy on the team,
yeah,
or do you just try to run it back and see what happens? And most of the time, it doesn't work out, and he just ends up requesting a trade. So
right,
we'll see, especially in the West too, with like how much better some of these teams are getting. Minnesota, like I mean, even in their conference right now, like yes, you can say New Orleans, Memphis, and Dallas, like maybe they're not the strongest right now,
yeah,
and they could potentially Houston could potentially be the second seed in that division there, or in that, but at the same time, like if they're worse than the Pelicans or the Mavericks, like that's gonna be, I think, a wake up call for them because those are two teams that also have not done a lot in the trade market. And if they end up, just essentially having better younger talent than them, then it's going to be kind of like, well, yeah, either Ime's got to go or we got to change this whole roster.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of, the Pelicans, I'm still curious to see, what they do something if they do something with Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. Those have been the two prominent guys on the trade block, right? Zion, I still think honestly, I think Zion should just leave out of New Orleans and go get a fresh start somewhere, right? I mean, coming off of your best season, in most games you played, I think you should play him. But you're dealing with Troy Weaver and Joe Dumars, so I feel bad for Pelicans fans, just a little bit that they have to deal with that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, Houston. I like I said, I'm curious to see what they end up doing. I don't think they're done yet, but yeah, I feel like if they come short of expectations again this year, yeah, definitely Kevin Durant is requesting another trade. Where to this time? I don't know, but yeah, it will be interesting to see what he ends up doing. So, any other moves that you wanted to touch on?
There wasn't a ton. I mean, there's honestly like shout out to guys like DeAndre Jordan, Marvin Bagley. Like, I don't know how you guys are still in Mike Conley got a contract. Like, these guys are, I feel like, could have been out of the league for a while, and they're still playing, and still getting contracts. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing obviously is that Jaylen Brown. I just want to see how the Sixers end up this year. Like, this is really now or never, I think, for them because with Daryl Morey being gone, you still have Nick Nurse, I'm pretty sure, right, as their coach.
Yep.
And, I've always thought Nick Nurse, since he won that title in 2019, like he had the potential to win another one. But, obviously every single year we've had a different champion. So it's kind of made it harder now to gauge, I feel like, some of these coaches and being like, well, can they be a multiple time, NBA champion? Or is it just kind of like the times that we're living in right now? And it's more up to like who's on the squad. But yeah, I mean, this has been a pretty crazy past like 48 hours, honestly. And it's going to be even crazier once LeBron and, some of these other guys who are still out there make the decision. Being it, we talked about it before, but I still really want to see what happens to Duran. I was a little more confident that he was going to stay, but now it's like, I'm not too sure. Like things are moving a little slower. Like you
Yeah.
said, maybe they're just waiting until after 4th of July, though.
I don't know, man. I mean, what I've been seeing, I mean, basically it was 6 p.m. and he was like, oh, he has a meeting with the Kings, and then he had two meetings with the Lakers. So I was kind of glad that, like, the Lakers jumped in and re-signed, traded for Kessler, But yeah, I don't know what's end up gonna go on. I think it's at some point, like the Kings don't have cap space, so at some point you got to look at it and say, "All right, man, like we got to agree on a number, right?" Because I said it last podcast. If you want to go to the Kings, you don't care about winning basketball. So yeah, you can respectfully get off my basketball team, right? Because you don't care about winning, you just care about the bag, which I respect it. Because there are some players in the league that just care about the bag, right? I mean, the whole Brooklyn Nets roster is basically that. So, you know, and so I respect it. Hey, if I'm getting paid, to play basketball, score 30 points, and getting paid $140 million, shoot. I mean, sign me up too, man. That's a dream. So, yeah, I think, I hope that they come to a resolution in the next couple of days. Yeah, maybe over, the holidays or after the holiday. So, yeah, it is, interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, big names left. Like you said, LeBron, James Harden, who's expected to go back to Cleveland, but I think he's waiting to see what Bron ends up doing, just to see, what that contract would look like. Duran, like we mentioned, Terry Eason, we mentioned. Payne Watson from Denver is somebody that's also interesting. Denver hasn't made any move, I don't think yet, which is surprising because,
No, the only thing I saw was they just signed Marvin Bagley,
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
like most random signing of all time.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think from Denver, right? You being upset in the first round, it's like you gotta change up something. So I know Cam Johnson, he's on an expiring deal, right? Aaron Gordon and his health history, Christian Braun, do you want to play him? So I know Jokic is expected to sign an extension, coming into the season before the season starts. But I mean, man, if you don't do much moves, then I would not be surprised if we get a little, turmoil starting there, once we get into the season from Jokic. But yes, that's another name. Ben Mathurin, he's another guy that hasn't signed anywhere. Rui, Draymond, but I'm not expecting him to go anywhere. I think that's again waiting to see what LeBron does. To kind of lower that money. Westbrook, if he's still in the league, I don't know. We'll see. Jonathan
He's gonna do
Kuminga,
what he did last year. He's not gonna be on a team day one, and then someone else is gonna sign him.
true. I could see that happening. Yeah. And then you have Bradley Beal, Chris Middleton, Pat Spencer, who else? Bruce Brown, Andre Drummond. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think the big names that were free agents are pretty much done. I think, obviously LeBron is pretty much the only one. LeBron and, some other guys like Draymond and James Harden are still, waiting. But like I said, I think those are more so they're going back to their team, but they're just kind of waiting to see what LeBron decides, to kind of make sure, they're able to sign him and give him the money, that respectively he does. Because we've seen, James Harden do it before, right? With the Clippers and with the Rockets, the Nets, he's done it before, kind of, taking a pay cut. The famous Daryl Morey, always, backdooring him a little bit. So we've seen that happen. And Draymond too. I mean, LeBron's his boy, so I'm sure he is all open arms and is willing to take a pay cut. In this last hoorah that Golden State's trying to put together before all of them break up and retire. And I was talking to my brother the other day. I was like, man, I don't know what Golden State does after Steph retires because I mean they don't really have any young guys, on the roster right now. Draft picks, I mean they have some, but depending on like if they're making playoff pushes and stuff like that, it's not really going to mean anything. But with the new lottery, it could change. So yeah, I mean Golden State, you're looking at one this season, the last dance. So
Well, they got Potts. Potts said he's gonna be the next Curry. So
yeah, I
and
I guess so. He's on my hate list. So, yeah, it's just unethical basketball from him. So, if it's taking you what 2 seasons to score 30 points in a basketball game, and you're supposed to be the next Stephen Curry, oh my gosh, hate to see it, Golden State fans. You guys are in for a ride. So, but yeah, so we'll obviously keep tabs on how the free agency how it all the summer plays out in the next couple of weeks here. Summer league is starting here on July 9th, so next week. So we'll be able to see some rookies go head to head. I know it's some big names. I think Caleb Wilson. You mentioned him earlier. I think he plays AJ, Darren, and Cam Boozer all in the summer league. So I know obviously, those guys, those bigger names, right? They play like the first 2 games and then they're pretty much done for the summer league. But some of those games will be pretty interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about that here in the near future. And obviously if there are any more big trades that come out of left field, we'll obviously talk about that as well. But that's all
yes,
we got
sir.
for you guys today. Until next time, we'll catch you guys.